Hello everyone. So after my last video, I tried to figure out exactly what was happening with Chroma, and after a couple hours of late night testing, I've managed to get all the damage formulas. And it turns out that Chroma in his current state is broken. Like really, really broken. And I hope to explain exactly what's happening to the best of my ability in this video. Anyways, assuming you didn't see my last video, you probably don't know what I'm talking about, so here's a quick summary of what's going on. Essentially, I noticed that my Vex armor was giving me a much larger buff than it was supposed to be giving me on certain weapons. So in my previous video, I was using a Tysus, and I was fighting a Corrupted Ancient, so I'm just going to replicate that here. So I got my Tysus out, and I got a Corrupted Ancient down there. So how much damage are we doing to him? Got 61, 61, 61, 61. Okay, so 61 damage. I'll go ahead and pop my Vex armor and damage myself so I get the Fury buff. There we go. And how much damage am I doing now? 21,937. Again. Okay. That's quite a lot. And doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It might just be a glitch. But let's see again. Is it gonna do it for me once more? Yep, still giving me 21,000 damage. And I kill him in 5 shots. Nearly 4. Okay, so what exactly is going on here? So to figure out exactly what the multiplier was that I just got there, all you have to do is just take the damage that you got after the Vex armor buff, which was 21,937, and then divide that by the damage that you had initially, which is 61, which gives us a multiplier of about 359. Now, why is it giving me such a high multiplier? Well, we can go back and look at what Chroma's multiplier is, and at 349% power strength, which is what I was at, essentially the formula is 1 plus 1.75, which is what Chroma's base armor multiplier is, and then you multiply 1.75 by the power strength over 100. So if it's at 200% power strength, you just do 200 over 100, which is just 2, and then that'll give you your number. So anyways, for our thing, we have 1 plus 1.75 times 349 over 100, which gives us a 7.1075 times multiplier, which is definitely not very close to the 359 times multiplier that we saw previously. However, what's interesting is that if you take the cube root of 359, it'll give you 7.1, which is the exact same thing as our multiplier here. So what exactly does that mean? Well, it means that at least in this instance, it seems as though that Chroma's armor buff is being applied 3 times over instead of just once. This phenomenon is also known as double dipping, which may sound familiar to some of you because double dipping was the reason why gas was so powerful just a couple of months ago. Anyways, now we have a theory, so we can construct a formula and test the damage output. So the formula that I made was base damage, which is just the initial damage, times 1 plus 1.75 times power strength over 100 to the power of 3. Now, when we substitute our values in there, we get 61, which was just the base damage of the Tysus on that Corrupted Ancient, times 1 plus 1.75. Now, the power strength is arbitrary. You can pick whatever value you deem fit and then just test it in that case. So I decided to go ahead and pick 200% power strength because that was a nice easy round number. So 200 over 100 to the power of 3. Now, this will give us a total of 5,558.625 damage. Okay, so now that we have our formula, all we have to do now is go and test it. So right here I have my Chroma, and he is currently at 200% power strength, as you can see right there, and I got the Tysus, still completely unmodded. So we'll go ahead and spawn in one guy at level 125, see what the damage is. Initial damage, still 61. Go ahead, pop Vex armor and secure Penta. Okay, what did we get? 5,597. Now, the damage that we were supposed to get was 5,558.625. That's a little bit less than the 5,597 we're currently getting. So what is going on here? I know that they're pretty close in value. In fact, the 5597 it's about a 0.68% difference, so it's less than 1%. But part of the reason why this is that the 35 initial, well, the 61 damage that you're seeing initially isn't actually 61 damage. It's in fact slightly more than that, because when you do the 35 base damage, which is the corrosive from the Tysis, and then you multiply that by the faction modifier on the infested, or the corrupted, I should say, it's 1.75. So 35 times 1.75 is actually 61.25 instead of 61. Now, when you substitute 61.25 into the formula, you actually end up with 5,581 damage, and that's an actual difference of 0.28%. So it's less than 1/3 of 1% difference in the actual damage numbers that you get in the end, so it's pretty safe to say that this formula is correct. So you might be wondering, well, if it only works on the Tysis, I mean, who really cares? Because, I mean, it's great and all, but it's not going to be that useful in the long run. Well, it doesn't only work on the Tysis, and to kind of show what weapons it works on and what weapons it doesn't, I'm going to use the Kraken, which just happens to be completely unmodded right now, and it's a pretty terrible weapon for the most part. But it is regular IPS damage, so I can show that for right now. Okay, so we got just regular Ancient with no buff, 46 damage. Okay, when I start to damage myself with the Penta, oh, am I going to die? Uh-oh. Maybe not, nope. Okay, so now at 350%, I'm dealing 171 damage now. Not a whole lot more compared to what the buffs I was previously getting. Not 300 times damage, and not even like 90 times damage, only a couple times more, and a lot more congruent with the actual Vex Armor's actual damage increase. However, if I bring something out like the Hema, for example, let's go and grab the Hema real quick, and then I'll have to grab Kastanas just to do damage to myself. Let's see, go ahead and grab the Hema. Because the Hema is a combined element weapon, much like the Tysis that I was using, it actually gains the buff from Vex Armor. So I'll just leave this completely unmodded, take everything off of here, and then I will also use the Kastanas just for self-damage. There we go, thanks to Kastanas, Hema, and we'll go ahead and see how much damage we're doing to this guy. There we go, spawn one guy in. Yeah, we got two there, but whatever, that's okay. So we're doing 45 damage, and then that 90 was a crit. Now, what about with Vex Armor on and its buff? And up to 350%. Okay, so now with the Hema, man, we're getting 4,000 damage. So we've gone from 45 all the way up to 4,000. And when you do the math on that, that is exactly the same damage buff they were getting with the Tysis. So essentially what this means is that on any combined element weapon, the damage buff from Vex Armor is applied 3 times over as opposed to once. And when I say combined element weapon, I'm talking about weapons that have their base damage as either magnetic, gas, corrosive, blast, radiation, or viral, or basically any element that is a combination of the 4 main elements: toxin, heat, cold, and electric. Now, that solves the first mystery of why my Tysis was doing so much damage. However, in my previous video, when I added mods onto my weapon, it seemed as though the damage buff was decreasing. And this formula doesn't accurately account for the damage when mods are added, so what's going on? Here, I'm going to be using the Meridetron as an example, just for a little bit of variety, instead of using the Tysis 24/7. And let's go ahead and figure out what the base damage is per pellet. So here we go, shoot him, and looks like we're consistently getting 8 damage per pellet. Okay, what about after Vex Armor? Vex Armor on, and hopefully I don't kill myself here. Really close to killing myself. But let's see, 686 damage per pellet. Okay, well, what about if we add Hornet Strike? Well, after we do the math, which is just the base damage, which is 686, times 1 plus 2.2, 2.2 being the Hornet Strike, is 220%, so that means it gives us 2,195.2 damage. So let's go ahead and see what that actually is. Let's go ahead and put Hornet Strike on there, 672 radiation damage. I'm just going to stock up. Oh, I'm already on full health, excellent. We'll spawn that guy in. think I actually have 2 enemies here. That's okay. So 24 damage per pellet now, and what that tells me is that we actually had a little bit less than 8 damage per pellet, and it was just rounding up. So that was the actual damage, just a little less than 8 on the first one. Okay, so let's go ahead and use our Vex Armor buff. There we go, 350. What are we doing now? 2,196 damage, which is 0.8 of 1 damage off from the actual damage. So the difference is just completely negligible. So that is dead on. We know that Hornet Strike is working correctly, and in fact all regular damage mods and multi-shot and just Bane mods in general, all those mods all work correctly with Vex Armor. There's no weirdness in all of them. All the buffs are applied after the double dipping correctly, so you don't have to worry about any of those mods. The weirdness comes in when you are dealing with elementals, and that's the reason why I was seeing less damage in my previous video and a smaller multiplier. And it's going to get a little bit complicated with the math here, but just bear with me and we'll try to get through this together. Okay, so now I'm going to try to break this down step by step on how I found the solution to this. So the first order of business was essentially just to find the actual base damage, and when you do the math out, it turns out it's about 7.5. And we know that it's already 686 after the buff, so that's a given. We don't have to do any math for that. Now, the question becomes, what elements do I use to try to figure out the elemental damage and then compare it to the actual base damage? Well, I decided to use about 150% elemental bonus, so that's just 190% and then 160%, and then I'm going to use it and combine it into radiation, the same as that's on the base of the weapon. And since radiation has a 1.0 multiplier against the corrupted ancients, there's going to be no weirdness with the faction damage, so I don't have to worry about that. Now let's go ahead and test this out and see how much damage we're doing to this guy. Okay, so right here we have, looks like we're hitting 19s, which is exactly 150% more damage than we were initially with the 8. So, okay, let's go ahead and then use our Penta and check out what the multiplier is. No Fury, 350%. Okay, so how much damage are we doing now? Now we're doing 914 damage, and before the buff, after the first buff, we were doing 686. So you can definitely see there's been a definitive damage decrease. Just not necessarily damage decrease, but there's been a decrease in the amount of buff we've been getting. So what exactly is happening? Well, one way to approach it is to take the damage that we got after the 150% elemental buff and then subtract the damage that we had before the buff. So it would be 914 damage minus 686, giving us 228. Now, that 228 number is essentially telling us how much extra damage we got per pellet from the 150% radiation. Now, what that means is we can try to find the multiplier that was affecting that radiation damage, and that'll eventually tell us what's actually going on. So if we take 228 over 7.5, which 7.5 is just the base damage, so that's going to tell us what the missing damage multiplier is. So 228 over 7.5 is equal to 30.4, and 30.4, you kind of just gonna have to guess and check and use different multipliers and then try to figure out what exactly is going on until you can get a number really close or exact to 30.4. So it turns out that if you use the 4.5 times buff from Chroma at 200% power strength and apply that twice and then add on the 1.5 times buff from radiation, instead of having it as 2.5, you actually write it as 1.5, you get 30.375, which is close enough to that 30.4. So now you have 228 over 7.5 times 1.5, which is the buff from radiation, times 4.5, which is the buff from Chroma, and then another double dipping, which is another buff from Chroma, so 4.5. So you end up with 228 over 7.5 times 1.5 times 4.5 times 4.5. Now, when you plug that into the calculator, you're going to get really, really, really close to 1, and that is exactly what we want to see, because that's essentially proving the equation. But you can go back and actually prove it with other weapons, which I'm going to do right now. So for the in-game proof, I'm going to be using the HEMA, and as we come over to the arsenal here, you'll see why in a sec. I'm using magnetic damage and viral damage, and the reason for that is because both magnetic and viral have a 1.0 multiplier against the corrupted ancient, so there's not going to be any weirdness regarding the faction multipliers, and you're going to actually see the real damage there. There's not going to be, you're not going to have to account for any of that. So that's just one extra step where you could mess up in the math. So here we have the magnetic damage, and essentially just two 60% mods giving me 120% elemental damage. And before you can actually calculate it, you have to know the formula, obviously. And so the formula for a base elemental combo weapon plus when you're adding on an elemental combo on top of it, you get base combo damage times the Chroma multiplier cubed plus the base combo damage times the elemental percentage over 100 times the Chroma multiplier squared gives you the actual damage. So when we sub in our values, we get 45 base damage on the HEMA times 4.5 base multiplier on the Chroma at 200% power strength cubed times, I'm sorry, plus 45 times 120 over 100 times 4.5 squared, giving us 5,194.125 damage. So now we get to go ahead and test this out and see what the damage number actually is. Go ahead and spawn him in, use Vex Armor and the Kastanas. So I get up to 350, there we go. Okay. So 5,202 damage, which is only about 8 damage off from our value that we got, so it's pretty accurate, and so we know that the formula is correct. So a quickish wrap up to this rather long video. Basically, when a combo element is the cause of a weapon's mods, it receives the Chroma buff twice. When a combo element is on a weapon before mods are added, basically that element's innately on that weapon, the element receives the Chroma buff 3 times. And when you have regular elements like cold, toxin, heat, and electric on a weapon, they get the regular Chroma damage buff. Damage, multi-shot, and Bane mods all work the way you would expect them to with the Chroma buff. Essentially, to maximize your damage output with Chroma, you want to use those weapons with combo elements that are innately on them. And you want to try to limit using elemental mods. But if you do have to use elementals, you want to make sure that you're using them in elemental combos and not as a standalone element. So as to finish off this video, I thought, hey, maybe I should probably show my regular Chroma build, and here it is. Essentially, it's not, I mean, you can morph it however you want, but you want as much power strength as possible, and this is just the best build that works for me. Again, you can switch out Quick Thinking for Rage if you want. If you don't like Transient Fortitude, you can switch that out for Intensify. If you really want to, you can actually switch out Quick Thinking for Prime Vigor if you want. Again, it's all down to personal preference, and it's kind of up to you, and you can make the build your own. But this is just personally what I run for my long runs. Anyways, I'll leave all the formulas in the description for you guys, and also, if you haven't joined the Discord yet, feel free to. I mean, we got plenty of people in there, pretty awesome. Some of them helped me figure this out last night, but as always, I'd like to thank you guys for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.